urgent needs that you see in these specific communities?
Well, I think one, preserving our quality of life, and when you have projects like the one down the street that's going to be too many units and take away and focus that we need to stand up and say, we can't do that.
Which one is that?
This is the Toscana.
Toscana, okay.
One that when I was a city council member, I worked with you to ensure that it wasn't going forward without addressing the
All right,
issues
so
that were
development is one big
Development is
issue.
one of them. Sidewalk repair. I created the 50-50 sidewalk program when I was on the city council. It's been discontinued. I want to refund that because it's at least 85 years and $1 billion to do that. We can, just the ones we know today.
But we still have to pay
So-
for half of it.
I'm sorry?
We have to pay for half of that?
Well, yes, part of that, but we'll still fund some of them.
All right.
But our streets, as I said, our streets are paved. It's important in our neighborhoods. It's making sure that we have, like I fought for, to have the new library that's here and our new senior center. Those are things that we need to continue to focus in on this area. But most importantly, it is public works, and it's also about ensuring that our firefighters, we haven't hired one firefighter in 4 years. And I stood strongly and said there are monies we could find to make sure that we bring back our fire department to a level that we think it's going to be. So I think it's public safety, public works, and focusing in on quality of life on the development issues that sometimes choke our neighborhoods. If you stand at Ventura and Sepulveda, or you stand at Ventura and Van Nuys, you can see it every single day.
Thank you. Eric, same question.
Thank you. I opened with this, the quality of life that I remember while I was first moved into Sherman Oaks. We moved just over the state border into Encino for the first 17 years of my life after that. And I remember what it was like when I played Little League at Encino Little League, when we had a community garden plot right along the 101 freeway by Tapia Brothers. I remember what it was like to be able to get lost with friends on a bicycle for a couple hours and to feel safe. So it certainly starts with public safety. It's not necessarily a concern that we don't have the safety now, but I want to maintain that. And I fought for that. In the midst of our worst recession, we made sure that we continued the momentum of hiring police officers. And last year, and we have some of our police officers here today who we should thank. Let's see one in the back here. We have the safest big city in America in terms of violent crime per capita last year in the United States. So keeping police officers first. Secondly, it's looking at our parks facilities and making sure that as we come back from the recession that we restore our parks facilities, including senior programs, which are very near and dear to me. Making sure that we have the basics taken care of, trimming trees again. And let's not kind of dilly-dally around paving our streets and repairing our sidewalks. We need to do this comprehensively once and for all in the city. It's going to take focus, it's going to take resources to do this, but we can't just keep doing the patchwork we've done for 70 years. We're paying on average $375 per person per year just for the damage to our cars caused by our streets. We can and we must do better. And lastly, it's that basic stuff that I said. I didn't say in 2020 I'd start returning phone calls. I've done it for 12 years. It'll be right when I am mayor, making sure that people have a 24-hour return policy for the phone calls you make. That's
Thank you very much. And let me follow up, and this would go to Eric. Traffic. We've synchronized all the lights on surface streets. We improved the 101-405 interchange somewhat. We're adding the carpool lanes on the 405. We're adding possible busway. We have the orange line. Yet, traffic is as bad or as worse as ever. Specifically, the Sepulveda corridor. We read in the local newspapers that we're studying a plan. Maybe we'll put buses there. Maybe we'll build a tunnel, which is not going to happen in any of our lifetime. What do you say to those who say you've got to come up with a traffic solution as mayor? Do you differentiate between surface streets and the freeways, which is more of Caltrans' issue? And what would you do initially as mayor to get things moving?
There's three things, and it's not going to be easy after 50 years of building this up. And anybody who says they can wave a magic wand and solve traffic is lying to you. But what we can do is three categories of things. One, continue forward with public transit. And not just the main lines, but the connectors to the main lines. And those neighborhood shuttles that can take you to the store, can take you to a meal, can take you shopping. Making sure that we have a north-south line here through the valley and also in the East Valley. We need to have something along the 405 corridor, probably either Sepulveda or Van Nuys, but that will come. And I do believe in our lifetime for sure.
What would that be?
We'll see.
What would that be?
It would probably need to be a heavy rail subway or light rail. But if you want to look at the pure numbers, every expert that I've talked to says that without heavy rail, you really aren't going to relieve enough. It's like widening the 405 freeway right now. That's almost a waste of $1 billion, right? It's like finding a slightly bigger sponge to throw into the ocean, wondering why it's waterlogged the moment it hits the water. We need a tunnel through the Sepulveda Pass. We need a transit tunnel that would also, the way we're looking at it right now, have a toll lane on top that would help pay for, whether it's rail or bus, but I prefer rail, that would be on the bottom. And that way it would help fund some of that. We have to make sure that we build up communities that are more self-contained so that you can walk to a meal, like on Tahunga, a place where you can do most of what you want without having to get into a car. And opposing some of the overdevelopment like the Villaggio Toscana. Those sorts of things which build up without infrastructure, the ability to actually put in what we need. So transit, better communities, and the use of technology. And I know my time is up, but technology is critical to solving air traffic as well.
So let me ask you the same traffic question again, but is there some, where would this be in terms of your priorities and what specifically would you do as mayor?
It'd be one of my top priorities. I live in the valley. I experience this every single day. And what were they thinking closing Coldwater Canyon for that many days? I don't understand it. And look, I have been an advocate on dealing with the big issues and the small issues on transportation. I loved Carmageddon weekend, right? Okay? Because you could go anywhere in LA because people change their behaviors, right? So we need to think about that every single day. But first and foremost, it is creating a public transportation system that is seamless so that you don't have to have fits and starts. And for me, this is not a new issue. When I was on the city council, I actually paid for a study that looked at options that we would have that would go, whether go under the 405 or other things that we could do that looked at the connector. And provided that with the MTA and said this is the beginning as they were looking at Measure R. Measure R that we voted for 4 years ago has $1 billion for this connector, the beginning of it. Because it is, and I agree with Eric on this, we need to see it in our lifetime. But it is also about the short-term things we do. Anti-gridlock zones, which I established, and said, how many of you drive down on Ventura Boulevard and you're driving right next to the curb, and all of a sudden that car is parked there at a time where it's supposed to not be there and it causes traffic? Doesn't that get you? Okay. Looking at banning road construction during rush hour, we have the law, let's enforce it. Okay? Let's make sure that we're making decisions that are important, that we don't look like places, and no disrespect to my colleague, but in Hollywood Heights, the traffic is awful. We need to make decisions that are responsible for the rest of the city of Los Angeles.
Let's change the subject a little bit. We have a question about the issue of homelessness. We certainly see a lot of it here in the valley. As mayor, and you go first on this one, what can you do to help? What programs exist that you support, or what would you change?
This is an issue near and dear to my heart. I started working on it when I worked for Mayor Tom Bradley, and then I became, for President Clinton and Henry Cisneros, the Deputy Director of the Interagency Council on the Homeless. We can end homelessness in our lifetime. We can end homelessness in 10 years by focusing in on making sure that, first and foremost, 40% of our veterans, 40% of the homeless, are veterans. That is criminal for people who have risked their lives for us. And we need to make sure, as I did when I worked for the mayor and others, is that the Veterans Administration actually houses homeless, be able to reach those veterans and deal with it. It's about outreach programs. It's about making sure we have permanent housing with supportive services. It's making sure that those families that just need that 1 month before they become homeless because they've lost their jobs, that we help them do that. And it means making sure that you look at not only the homeless families, but you look at mental health issues. We have so many individuals who are on the streets of Los Angeles. We see them. They're mentally ill. How do we help them get into the right kind of shelter? It's getting the funds we need. And guess what? People don't talk about it until someone dies or it's an issue on the federal level, because you don't see it unless sometimes you're getting off the freeway. There are faces to those homeless individuals. So we need to work to ensure that we provide the kind of services. And as mayor, and as I have, whether it be working for Mayor Bradley or working in the federal level, homelessness will be a top priority for me. Making sure we have a real housing trust fund that provides the dollars, and making sure that we don't forget those who served us in the military, and they should never be homeless. Thank you.
From the beginning of this campaign, I've said that we will end homelessness in Los Angeles. And when folks say, well, how can you end homelessness? It's not to say you will never see any homeless person on the street, but chronic homelessness can be ended. And it is my priority, and I've said it since the beginning of this campaign, that I will end homelessness, chronic homelessness, as mayor. It's much more expensive for us to keep people alive on the street. One visit to an emergency room can cost us $20,000. as opposed to $5,000 or $6,000 to put somebody in housing for the year with the services he or she needs to stay in housing. And I don't think there's a lot of philosophical difference between the two of us. You know, Ms. Greuel's worked on homelessness a lot. I have too, ever since I was a teenager here in the Valley. We used to go downtown and work on Skid Row in the weekends. But as city officials, I have worked on this issue with results. For instance, 3 different housing projects opened up in Hollywood and Silver Lake just this past year alone, where we got to know the names of the individuals on the street. We didn't just count them in the homeless census. We actually asked, what's your name? How long have you been out here? Are you a veteran? Do you have a substance abuse issue? We tried to diagnose mental health issues. And then we got them into the housing that they deserve. We ranked them by who was closest to death. It's a really morose thing to do. But one at a time, we've taken them off the street with something called Hollywood Forward. Check it out if you want to know what kind of results-oriented person I am. 174 people so far we've taken off the streets. We, to our best knowledge, don't think any of them have fallen back on the street when usually about 50% of people who go into housing would. That is the model, and we now have to fund it to make sure we save money in the long term by taking people off the
Thanks
streets.
very much.
I have a question for Eric. You've been asked this before. The conventional wisdom is that, as you sort of just alluded to, philosophically you're similar on a lot of issues. I'd be willing to bet if you just read a transcript of this hour, you may not be able to tell who's speaking. So you have said that you are different. The two of you are different. So I want you to explain to the group here what the big differences are between the two of you, and possibly do it without repeating the similar themes you've already said.
Absolutely. You know, I've said since the beginning of this that I was not going to run on rhetoric, but on results. That I was going to look at ways that we have actually made changes, that we have counted the numbers. I've tripled the number of parks in my district. Half the parks built in the city of Los Angeles, in the district that had the least land. And I don't mean from 1 to 3, from 16 to 47. We helped the school district double the number of schools. I'm very proud to have board member Tamar Gallison's endorsement. And I want to work, continuing to make sure we've done things like putting after school programs in each one of them. Cut crime, violent crime by 2/3, being #1 in job growth. But the difference is also around those moments of crisis. Look, 4 years ago, this city was headed towards bankruptcy. It was projected that it would be in 5 years, by next year. And some folks, respectfully, my opponent was on the sidelines while I was in there negotiating pension reform. That doesn't win you a lot of political friends. It doesn't mean they spend millions of dollars on you at election time, but it was the right thing to do, and it's a difference. You need a mayor who can stand up at those difficult times, not make the easy decisions, but actually make the tough ones, who has a proven record of getting jobs, turning around neighborhoods, of some of the best policy nationwide, the biggest green building ordinance in this country. I'm endorsed by the Sierra Club, the biggest clean water bond in our nation's history at the local level, looking at ways that the largest city now to have a feed-in tariff to put solar power on our roofs. Those are real things. They're tangible. They're material. They're not just plans for the future. They're not just a record before City Hall. They're what I've done over the last decade, and I believe that's a difference.
There are real differences. Yes. Experience. Yeah, I'm a little older. Yes, I've done a few things. As someone said who endorsed me from the BizFed said, you signed the front of the check and the back of the check. As city controller, I have been that tough fiscal watchdog. I have gone after people who said that when they have stolen money from the city of Los Angeles, I've referred them to the district attorney. I've said to DVP, you're not performing the way you should be, and here's what you need to do. I've stood up and said we need pension reform, not just for new employees, because although I support the kinds of things they did, guess what? How much money do you think we're going to save next year in the new hires? We're not hiring anyone. Maybe $1.5 million. I think we need to do pension reform on current employees, and I've said that. And I've said Department of Water and Power. They didn't do that in the last 4 years. So I'm willing to stand up and say, here are the things that we need to do to make sure Los Angeles gets back on track. My history is such that, yes, I've got a great history with so many of you when we talked about the senior center, with preserving more than 1,200 acres of open space, of, yes, spearheading, architect of business tax reform, of making sure that Los Angeles is a place that can run. Because right now, how many of you think LA runs really well? Okay. You want someone who's actually going to be able to manage that. I've done that. I've been able to manage a city controller. I've done it in creating jobs and working my family business and our iconic entertainment industry. But more importantly, I've spoken up for you and your taxpayer dollars to make sure they're not wasted, and I will do that as mayor.
Thank you. We're going to do the lightning round, yes or no question. But Eric, does that mic work?
Fantastic.
All right. So just bear with me for 1 second. Just a couple of quick questions with the three of us. When people give you money, what do you think they want?
My husband, nothing. Nothing. I'm just teasing you, Dean. Look, I have a lot of people. My friend from 3rd grade gave me money. I have a friend who I met recently who said, I know you're going to create jobs, $1,300. You know, they gave it just because they believed in me. There's nothing, you know, I can't be bought and sold, trust me, for that. There's lots of people I've gone after who have given me money, and including the DWP.
What
and
do you
I just
think?
want to be able to say, because, you know, a moment ago, I said, you know, don't want to be negative. Who was the first person who spoke tonight? My opponent. Who brought up DWP? My opponent, not me. I'm just saying that it is important that you, my mom taught me and my dad taught me, when someone comes after you, you respond. That's what I've taught my son, and so that's all I'm doing is saying, I'm going to